right, commission members, you are now live. Thanks. Have a great meeting.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Brian Moffitt, and I would like to welcome everyone to the meeting of the Asheville Downtown Commission for April 8th, 2022. The Asheville Downtown Commission was created by the City Council for the sustainability and continued development of downtown, a vital urban center of Western North Carolina's economic, cultural, and visitor activity. The Downtown Commission provides City Council with recommendations on downtown policies and initiatives. In addition, downtown commissioners currently fill 3 out of the 9 seats of the city's Design Review Committee, which reviews development projects within the Central Business District, the River Arts District, and hotel projects outside of those areas. The Downtown Commission also has the opportunity to provide input on projects outside of the scope of design review. All committee members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we continue to work through our committee meetings this way. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the committee page. We have an option for the public to listen live by phone. And for anyone out there today joining us, welcome. At this time, I will go through and introduce all the committee members who are participating virtually. We've been doing this for a couple years now. We know the drill. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you're not speaking. If you have a question or would like to speak, unmute and remute your phone after you're done or device. Committee members, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Andrew Fletcher, Vice Chair.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Tal Frankfurt.
Good morning, everyone.
Kimberly Hunter.
Howdy, howdy.
Hello. Stephen Lee Johnson.
Good morning.
Robin Raines is not in attendance. Megan Rogers.
Good morning.
Guillermo Rodriguez.
Good morning.
Good morning. Ricardo is not with us. Ruth Summers.
Good morning.
And our City Council liaison, Sage Turner, will join us a little later, I believe. Very good. Okay, at this time, we will go through and we will do an approval of minutes. Again, these are the draft action minutes from our March 11th meeting. The full minutes are available by basically reviewing the video online. Are there any revisions or questions regarding this, or do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve Summers.
Very good. Is there
that?
Okay. Second by Gio. I will go through and call roll. Andrew.
Aye.
Tal.
Aye.
Kimmy.
Aye.
Stephen Lee.
Aye.
I'm an aye. Megan.
Aye.
Gio.
Aye.
Miss Ruth.
Aye.
And Sage is not with us, so the motion passes. Very good, thank you. I don't believe we have any public comment, either written or voicemails. Is that correct?
That's correct. I see
Okay.
a number that might be trying to connect right now in our
Okay.
queue. Let's give that just a minute.
Okay, I'll go over. We have a very nicely abbreviated agenda this morning. We talked about briefly whether or not we should cancel this month's meeting, but there were a couple of things we wanted to go ahead and get to basically clear up room for next month's, which will not be as brief. So we will have a presentation on migratory birds and lighting. We will have Emily Ball on to give us an update on addressing homelessness and give you a chance for questions. We will be tabling or moving the discussion on the college patent bike lanes because the city staff transportation has not yet completed all of the revisions to that based on all of the input that they have received. So we'll try to get that next month, and then we'll go through our updates and reports and any informal discussion. So did that person, were they able to get in?
I'm going to see if I can make this work.
Okay.
There looks like there's a caller. Okay.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, everybody. This is Danielle DeBella with BRAC. I'm a board member at large with the Lights Out Initiative. Can you all hear me?
Yes. So are you
Okay.
are you on for presenting the migratory bird items, or
I
are you-
am.
Okay, great. Got it. So we can do it
Okay.
this way.
Okay, very good. Kimmy, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I can wait till after the comment.
Oh, I think this is actually our presenter for our first item. So if you've got something you
Oh.
want to go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I don't usually care about these things, but because of the video, but my name often doesn't appear as present. So I don't know who's handling the meeting minutes. I just don't really care because I know where I am when I'm there. But for the record, we may want to fix that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we can move into our first item. And Danielle, I believe you can speak to, I think you're making a, speaking to us on migratory birds and lighting, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And I know I called in and it said it's going to cut me off in 3 minutes. So I don't know if that's still going to occur. I think I went through the wrong route somehow. So I
Danielle?
apologize if I have. Yes,
Are you able to log in through the Google Meet invite?
I did not get one of those. I don't believe. I was forwarded information from Paulina. However, I don't have that.
Okay. So I think it's worth it for me to try to get you on here.
Okay, fair enough.
Let me try calling you back at the number I see here, and I'll get your email address and I'll add you to this invite. Can we just?
Okay, that sounds super.
Okay.
Sorry, everybody. Thank you.
A suggestion to the chair that we move to the next agenda item while Dana handles getting Danielle.
Well, I was going to try to see if Emily is on here and if she's willing to go ahead and get started. I agree. Hey, Emily. Do you mind going ahead and giving us an update on the homelessness and what we're doing, and then give the commission a chance to quiz you on a few things? Does that sound okay?
Sure, happy to do that. Good morning.
morning.
I'm Emily Ball. I'm glad to be with you all. Thank you for the invitation. My plan is to just tell you a little bit about my role here at the city and give you some general updates, but then really answer any questions that you have. I think folks often have a lot of curiosity and questions about homelessness, and the way that we work on homelessness is actually really complex and technical. And so wanted to just be sure that you all have opportunity to ask questions and have some discussion. So again, I'm Emily Ball. I am part of the Community and Economic Development Department here at the city. We have 2 positions in our department that are dedicated to homelessness, although one of those is vacant. So at the moment, we have me. Our role at the city, certainly the city has a kind of municipal response to homelessness, responsibility to respond to homelessness. Additionally, the city of Asheville serves as the Continuum of Care lead, and that is really the primary focus of my role and the primary thing that I want to talk about today. So the Continuum of Care is a HUD framework that kind of describes the work of ending homelessness. The big idea of a Continuum of Care is that rather than running in a bunch of different directions as a community, we need to come together and have a common approach and do this as a single homeless service system. So the goal is to look at our population within a defined geography. And for us, that geography is Buncombe County, so not meaning county government, but the geography of Buncombe County. Look at our homeless population within that geography, look at the mix of services and resources that are available within that geography, and then continually be tweaking that so that we are increasingly better able to respond to the needs of our particular homeless population. So for example, we have a large veteran population within Buncombe County. We want to be sure we have a lot of resources available to homeless veterans to best respond to that need. The Continuum of Care framework that the federal government uses, this is applied across the country. There are over 400 Continuum of Care across the country. Every Continuum of Care is responsible for having a lead entity, and in our community, that's the city of Asheville. And one of the responsibilities of that is data management and reporting to the federal government. So we operate a database, the Homeless Management Information System, to collect client level information so that we have a clear picture of who's homeless in our community and what programs they're interacting with. And then another piece of that responsibility is facilitating access to federal funding for homeless and housing programs. So our department, our homeless staff, again, that's just me at the moment, are responsible for facilitating 2 application processes for HUD Continuum of Care funding and Emergency Solutions Grant funding, which are around $2 million a year combined that support homeless and housing programs in our community. So big idea as the Continuum of Care is that we are taking kind of the bird's eye view of homelessness in our community, working with service providers, working to convene some consensus across our community about how to best respond to folks who are homeless. Want to give you just a few general updates from the city. The first is about the Ramada. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Ramada project that we've had. We've had a non-congregate shelter operating there since April of last year, and that just wound down last week. And I feel really good about the way that wound down. We worked really hard to come up with positive exit options for as many people as possible there so that we didn't have a lot of folks returning to the streets. I feel really good about the data, the quality of data that we have in that project. And last week, at most, we had 16 people who returned to being unsheltered. Of those, 5 had housing plans, but did have a gap between shelter ending and when their unit would be available. 2 of those folks have already moved in this week, so are now housed. And of the other 11, I would say it's certainly not true that all 11 of those folks would have slept outside that night. People are resourceful and good at figuring things out and often end up, doubled up at the last minute or are able to work something out. Certainly some of those folks would have been outside. And I think what happens next is that we want to really work closely with our service providers to be sure that that those guys stay connected, that they're able to get outreach services. I had a meeting with AHOPE staff the day after the shelter closed to just do some pass off information, let them know the outcomes for the folks who are there and who to be really looking out for. So we're still working on our data, but hoping to provide kind of a general community update about the outcomes of the Ramada project soon. But I do feel like a lot of really strong outcomes happen for folks that would not have otherwise occurred. As I'm sure you know, we also have, we're supporting a real estate transaction at the Ramada. So Shangri-La Industries is working to purchase that property. That's not yet closed. Closing is still in the works. But that is in process, and that property will become permanent supportive housing for folks who are exiting homelessness. The projection is about 100 units. 50 of those will be for people who've been chronically homeless and 50 for veterans who've been homeless. I also wanted to mention about Shangri-La that they have hired one of the shelter participants that we've had on site there in the past year. So he's going to continue to be on site there. And I think that will be really great. He is a real asset there and has done a lot of community work. So will be a good sort of connector for them and getting to know the neighbors and that kind of thing. Secondly, wanted to tell you about the RFP that we've had out for a consultant to help with a strategy specific to unsheltered homelessness. As I'm sure you know, this is a partnership between the city, the county, and Dogwood Health Trust. Dogwood is funding the consultancy, but that will route through the city of Asheville. Proposals were due on the 18th, and we received 11 proposals. We are working through those now, going to interview a handful of those folks and expecting to make a recommendation to council in early May. But I feel really excited about that. I feel like the quality of proposals that we got was excellent. The quality of firms that responded was excellent. So I think that's going to has the potential to be really high impact for our community. Just a couple other things. We are finalizing our point in time count data. The point in time is our annual count of the number of folks who are homeless on a single night at the end of January. And we should have that available at the end of April, so in just a couple weeks. And then lastly, just wanted to mention the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee. It's a jointly appointed city and county committee. I'm sure you all are familiar with that. We are really working to make that a primary resource in our community for information related to homelessness, wanting to provide really good updates to the community through that, expecting to use that committee really heavily in the process with the consultant as an opportunity for folks to provide input and for us to provide updates to the community. That group meets on the last Friday of the month at 9 a.m. and I'd certainly encourage any of you to participate in that if you're interested in that. I wanted to say thanks to Megan and Robin. I know that they have been coordinating with other folks in the community and appreciate you guys doing that. Also, just wanted to say that I'm happy to be a resource to you all at any point, happy to answer any questions. But again, we're really hoping to have HIAC, the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee, be just kind of our primary opportunity for folks in the community to get those updates about homelessness and the city's response. So those are updates for me. I'll stop there, but I am happy to discuss anything you'd like to or answer any questions that you have.
Do we have any questions for Emily?
Hey, Emily. Thanks for the update. I'm interested. So I know there was a 10-year plan for eradicating homelessness in Asheville, and that ends this year. So what's the plan for a new plan?
Great question.
And how do we get to actually, right, like, is eradicating homelessness? Because I believe that the number of people that identified as homeless during the term of the plan tripled. So like, is eradicating, well, it was like 200 and something, and it's about 600. Maybe I could be wrong. But if eradicating homelessness is actually the right goal, achievable goal, or can we set up more kind of like milestones of addressing homelessness specifically in downtown Asheville, and especially highlighting the business survey that I think we're discussing today, where the number one issue the business owners identified was reducing homelessness in downtown. So that was a long-winded question.
Great questions. The original 10-year plan was adopted in 2005, and then we most recently have had a 5-year plan that is concluding this year. So we have not yet begun sort of developing a new plan. I think that has traditionally lived with HIAC, the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee. So I think that you should expect to see something from that group along those lines soon. But I also think because we have this consultancy coming specific to unsheltered homelessness and the strategy about that, and it's not possible to sort of separate out the unsheltered population from the larger context of how we end homelessness in our community. So I think we'll see how those things weave together, if that makes sense. I think we may or may not need a new strategic plan in light of the fact that we will have this set of recommendations and strategies coming from the consultant. The homeless population has not increased in the last 12 years or so. We've always been above 500, below 600. I'm not sure where that 200 number is coming from that you mentioned, maybe a subpopulation. But our population has stayed relatively flat for a pretty long time now. What I would say about the goal of ending homelessness is, yes, absolutely, we want that to continue to be our goal. But what that means is two things. One, it means we want to do that on a very individual level. So we want to end homelessness person by person. But the way that we do that is by building out a system that has the capability to do that. The term at the federal level is functional zero. And what that means is that we build a homeless service system that is highly responsive so that when people become homeless, we're able to address that crisis really quickly with them, have them move through that system in under 90 days and exit into permanent housing and then not return to homelessness. So that the idea is that people will always have a housing crisis. That's reality. All of us on this call will have a next crisis in our lives. And for folks who don't have a lot of support in place, don't have a lot of resources to draw on when that crisis occurs, they can become homeless. The goal is that our system, again, is able to really quickly and effectively respond when that crisis does occur.
Andrew, go ahead.
Thanks, Emily, for that info. I have a question. This number's been pretty stable, but it's obviously not the same 500 or 600 people for during this time. Do we have an idea of how many people are becoming homeless and how many people are entering that population every year and how many people are leaving that population every year? I know there's some that are chronically homeless that probably are counted multiple years. but what's our sense of the churn of those numbers?
Also a great question. What a fun group of people. Thank you. Thank you for this really thoughtful engagement. That's exactly right. It's not a static population. And it's also exactly right that we have some folks who have been homeless for a number of years in our community who would have been counted year after year in that chronic subpopulation. We don't have data on inflow and outflow, partly because ideally, I said earlier, we manage that homeless management information system. Ideally, we would have all of our homeless service providers and anyone who connects with that population participating in that database. And then we would be able to measure inflow and outflow and really do some detailed data analysis. We're not yet at that point in our community. Participation in that database is voluntary unless you are an agency using HUD funding that requires you to participate. And so we have, in the last 2 years, we've doubled the participation in that database and are working with our last remaining providers who are not participating on pathways to have them join that. So I don't have actual data to share, but we're certainly working towards that goal.
So how far are you away from getting everyone that's involved to participate in that database? And are there particular challenges like privacy laws and things like that you run up against?
I would say at the moment we have 3 agencies who we're in active conversation with about participating, and then we'll have more or less a comprehensive data set in our community. I think the challenge is that the database is something that the city pays for, so there's no cost to agencies in participating in that. I think the challenge is just the sort of hassle of data entry and doing all of the training and getting access to that system. And I also think some agencies are often different funders have different requirements around particular databases that you have to use or particular ways you have to do reporting. And so can end up being duplicative for some providers if they have other databases that are mandated to use. I don't think I don't think there are other barriers than that. So I think they are things that I feel relatively optimistic that we'll be able to get to that point in the next year or 2.
Oh, that's great. Within your department, I know you're dealing with people who are, and people in programs that deal with people who are already experiencing homelessness. I'm of the opinion that it's both cheapest to the public funds and best to the individuals experiencing the issue to try to intervene before they become homeless. Is that within your purview at the city, or is that somebody else's desk that those types of programs work at?
Both, I would say. So the kind of technical language is emergency assistance programs are things like Evelyn, or the county has some emergency assistance funding, ABCCM. Those are things like, I've gotten behind on my utility bills, or can you help with a portion of my security deposit, that kind of thing. That's quite upstream from homelessness, obviously very positive and helpful. Kind of next rung down from that is homelessness prevention, which in our field is considered part of that homeless service system. And so we want to have a really robust prevention program to decrease inflow into that system. Homelessness prevention is really targeted to people who, it is not to be confused with eviction prevention. So vast majority of people who get evicted do not become homeless, and homelessness prevention is intended to really target folks who are most likely to end up at an emergency shelter if they do get evicted or on the streets. We know from national research that the best predictor of who those folks will be is whether or not they've experienced homelessness in the past 7 years in particular. So the funding for homelessness prevention, that's one of the screening criteria for eligibility. The Emergency Solutions Grant that I mentioned earlier that we facilitate access to, homelessness prevention is one of the activities that it funds. And in our community right now, we have Helpmate, Homeward Bound, ELIDA, and that's it. Helpmate, Homeward Bound, and ELIDA, and ABCCM, all providing homelessness prevention along those lines to different target populations. So ABCCM, for example, is doing that for veterans, ELIDA for transition age youth up to age 25, helpmate for survivors of domestic violence, et cetera. But we do have an active homelessness prevention effort across our community.
Great. Thank you very much. And sorry to my fellow commissioners for stacking so many questions in a row, but I got very curious. Thank
Okay,
you.
I've got Kimmy and then Tal and then Gio. Go ahead, Kimmy.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for your presentation. So my first question, I have a couple of short questions. The database that you said you used, does it also track migratory homelessness? Like, is it integrated with other cities, municipalities, and towns where that information can help to understand people who are migrating as a result of not having homeless resources where they were and maybe moving to another town to obtain them?
No, there are some opportunities for data sharing across systems. So every continuum of care is required to have an HMIS, and there are opportunities to do some data sharing across those geographies. We don't currently participate in that, but one of the entry questions in HMIS is about the zip code of your last permanent address, and which is getting at where were you living when you became homeless in this episode of homelessness. And there's also an entry question about where folks were the night before they entered. So for example, ABCCM's Veterans Restoration Quarters program is a transitional housing program for veterans. Veterans are often coming to our community partly because we have such a good VA medical center here that is a regional access point for healthcare. And so a lot of the inflow into that Veterans Restoration Quarters is folks coming from outside of Buncombe County, and we're able to track that from that night before question in HMIS. I don't have that aggregated, so I can't just quickly sort of run a report and tell you what our overall community numbers look like, but that is data that programs are tracking.
Thanks. And then my other question is, what other cities, towns, municipalities, what have you, are at that zero level? You talked about the goal of what it is that you're doing and others like you in this work. And so what other towns are at zero, near zero, maintain zero, and why? Is it an infrastructure? It's a wraparound of mental health services. I noticed that some of the folks you mentioned don't necessarily have the mental health components wrapped into all of the services they provide. So I think for me, I'm just trying to understand, what does it look like to be at or near zero at a regular, like, that's our pace. That's what we're up to. Thank you for your time and all of what you do.
I can't tell you off the top of my head what those other communities are, but I am happy to follow up with that information and get that to Dana, and she can send that out to you. There is not a community, to my knowledge, that has reached functional zero for all populations. So across the board, functional zero for homelessness. There are communities that have reached functional zero for either veterans or for people who are chronically homeless. So that's been the real push across the country the last, probably 6 or 7 years, is those two target populations in particular. A lot of resources are available for homeless veterans, and we know that people who are chronically homeless have the most complex needs and the least ability to exit homelessness without some type of intervention. So real focuses in a lot of communities on one of those two populations. And I'm sorry, I think that there was a last part of your question that I'm not responding to.
Well, I recognize I have other commissioners that want to ask questions, so that's acceptable. And I would love to get your information so I can continue through email. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Go ahead, Tal. You're muted.
There you go. I feel like the reason why a lot of organizations are not using the HMIS system is because it's mainly to report information to HUD rather than actually track and create ongoing change. So I wonder if the city has explored other solutions that integrate with that, so can streamline the reporting while offering some value to the external agencies, like follow-up surveys via text messages to see what's the status of the clients and so on. So the usage of technology rather than defaulting to just the HUD system is just a reporting mechanism. It's not really a case management solution. And then the second question is around what are we doing in the short term, right? When we go outside, like when we go out downtown and we walk downtown, what do we do at that point, like in the short term, between now and eradicating homelessness or getting to that zero? What can we do to reduce that feeling of unsafety downtown?
So I don't actually think that, I don't know, if you know otherwise, I'd love to talk, but I don't actually think that that is a primary barrier for agencies in using the homeless management information system. It does actually have a lot of functionality and can be really useful. I know ALIDA is one of the agencies that joined in the last couple of years, and they were really excited about what it meant for reporting for their other programs, because they were able to just quickly run a demographic report, for example, and not need to be tracking a bunch of spreadsheets and all that. So I do actually think that it is a value add. It can be really cumbersome to get into that system on the front end, but I think for agencies that have joined, I think it is really useful in their day-to-day work, and it does actually have quite a bit of functionality. We have to use a system. There are some specs from the federal government that we have to follow, and we have to do some annual reporting from that system to HUD. But the majority of the usefulness of HMIS, I think, is actually day-to-day for providers and for us as a community to really be looking at our local data. Your second question was, what do we do in the immediate? Right, we have a lot of people who are homeless in our community right now. I think our community is in a really tough spot, and I would also say that we're certainly not alone in that. That is what's happening across the country. We're seeing this is a really direct result, I think, of the pandemic. And that's not exactly that people lost their jobs because of COVID and now sleep outside. It's not a quick or clean path from point A to point B. In that, I think it's more that we've had folks who maybe were just kind of right on the edge, maybe unstably housed, didn't take a lot for them to lose housing. Maybe they were paying, $100 a month to stay with a friend, and then that friend wasn't able to keep them during the pandemic, those kinds of things. I think a lot of people with pre-existing mental health and substance use disorders, those things certainly did not improve in the pandemic. I think all of that has gotten just more difficult for people. Services were really decreased during the pandemic and are starting to come back, but there are a lot of, like we have lost some shelter bed capacity, for example, or libraries where people would often go were closed for a period of time. And so just the things that kept people more stable were pulled back a bit. And so I think we've seen this real increase in instability in our community. And again, across the country, I just participated in a National Alliance to End Homelessness conference on unsheltered homelessness. And it was everything that I heard from other communities was very similar to what we're seeing in our community, which is why we have this consultancy for someone to help guide us around responding to unsheltered homelessness in particular. It really seems like that's been the specific increase in our community. I would say our focus at the city has really been on creating additional shelter capacity so that folks do have the opportunity to come inside. So that was the Ramada initiative. We had 116 people come through that. We supported the nightly winter shelter at Trinity United Methodist, as well as the shelter at ABCCM that's still running through the end of this month. What I know is that when folks are outside, it's either because they can't or won't come into the shelters that are available to them. So part of our charge as a community is to build out interventions that people will be more responsive to, that are based on what their particular needs are. In our community right now, it is close to impossible to get a shelter bed if you don't have a state issued ID, which, many, many people who are homeless don't have that. And once you lose that ID, it's really difficult to regain that. So just working with providers on what those barriers are, how can we work around that? Or if we can't work around that, how can we build out other interventions that are available to people who are outside? We also, the city is funding street outreach positions at Homeward Bound. So that's a key part of our overall strategy. But I would say, I think we are going to continue to see this increase in kind of the escalated nature, like the difficulty of unsheltered homelessness, as well as the volume of unsheltered homelessness, until we're able to build out some additional interventions.
Related to short-term management too, I'll just chime in and say, like, I encourage us to consider specifically what the concerns are. So is it presence of individuals, and what about that is contributing to this negative experience? You know, is it illegal behavior? Is it open drug use? Is it, so, because we have different tools to address each of those things. Is it mental health issues? And, you know, the county also is working on different strategies. They have a community diversion program now, where if people are likely to be interacting with the justice system, they can actually provide assistance to those individuals. So I do just encourage us not to combine everything into this one issue of homelessness, because we do have some good strategies, I think, to address different some of the different specific issues that we're seeing that may be associated with our larger homelessness.
Right. And when I finally get to my questions, I want to engage with how you define positive exit options, because we don't want them just out of sight or out of town. We want them out of homelessness. Gio, you had something.
Yeah, my question is specifically for just general information across the country that's been taken lately is LGBTQ youth are about 120% more likely to experience homelessness. We are seeing that in Asheville. LGBTQ youth, right off the bat, these people are presented with a really uneven playing field, because even if they do get services as homelessness, they are subsequently victims of violence and so forth. I just wondered if we in the city help to identify that particular subgroup, and if any services that are geared to meet their specific needs.
Yeah, I think that has certainly been a priority population for the federal government, recognizing all of the things that you just said, and also recognizing that we have a kind of time-limited opportunity to intervene while people are in that age group, so that they don't spend years on the street. Like, we certainly want to avoid that if at all possible. I think for me, it's been really exciting to have Elida as a partner at the table. That's been new. You know, they're a longstanding community organization, done a lot of really good work, but it's been relatively new for them in the last couple of years to have a homelessness focus, and specifically to be operating housing programs and homelessness prevention programs for that age group. We also I convene a regular work group of providers that are specifically focused on that population. So we've got Elida participating in that, Caring for Children, and specifically the Trinity Place program. Youth Outright participates
Youth
in
Outright.
that.
Thank you, Youth Outright. I was going to ask about them.
Goodwill, the school liaison. So every school system across the country is federally mandated to have a staff position that is a liaison to students who are experiencing homelessness. So those folks participate in that group. So our intention there is just to really pull together the people who are working with that population, so that they can kind of cross-pollinate with resources and information, and we can collectively develop some strategy and just have some vision around, you know, again, I think it's such an early intervention opportunity that we want to be taking. I will say that a real challenge for that population is the housing piece of it. So, you know, the work of ending homelessness means that you find homes for people and that you provide the support they need to stay in those homes. A challenge that I know Elida in particular has been running into with their housing work is finding landlords who are willing to say yes to, in general, it is difficult for housing programs to find landlords who are willing to say yes, right? Based on the population, based on the rental rates and all of that. But for Elida in particular, they're working with folks who have zero rental history because they're, you know, 18 or 19 and are just not coming from that kind of background. And so I think that's a particular challenge for us to kind of get our arms around either a different strategy for landlord engagement or a different strategy for housing configuration that helps them build that kind of rental history before they go out into the rental market.
Thank you. That's a very thorough answer.
Sage, you had your hand up.
No, Emily's got it. She covered it. I was just going to mention Trinity Place and Youth Outright, and yeah, great job, Emily. Emily, thank you for being with us today to share all of this. You've been a tremendous resource.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Any final comments or questions? So I had one. You were talking about the Ramada project, and you mentioned positive exit options, and I don't know what. I know what they can mean, but I know what I might mean by that. What does that mean in your world? What is a positive exit option when they leave a shelter?
Yeah. Well, certainly the best case scenario is that they leave a shelter and move into their own apartment. And we had a number of folks in that particular position. And that is the goal for most people. I would say for some people, let me back out. The way that I think about the work of ending homelessness, meaning how do we get people to a positive exit, is this kind of like funnel. If this makes sense. So we want to be at the bottom of this funnel. We have housing programs for people who are homeless. Those are publicly funded programs, often certainly also have a mix of funding that includes private philanthropy. But those are our kind of like most expensive, deepest resource, just prized possession, right? And so we want to retain those for folks who have really no other option, people who cannot do anything but use one of those programs in order to not be homeless. And so what that means is that above that, we want to be working with folks really creatively on any other solution that might work for them. So what that means on the ground, what that meant for me at the Ramada is talking to folks about reconnecting with friends and family. We had 3 people that we bought bus tickets for. And I'm saying we, but I don't mean the city in this. I mean the initiative. We worked with some private donors to create some resources for that. But 3 people we bought bus tickets for to go back home. And that's not us just like shipping homeless people to other communities. That is us calling mom in the Midwest to confirm that she wants him to come back home and has space for him. And we'll meet him at the bus station, really, really due diligence on that process. So reconnecting with friends and family was certainly part of it. And where that is positive and healthy for people, we want to support that. That gives them a lot of resources to draw on. And I'll say about the Ramada that I think, everyone who entered the Ramada was unsheltered prior to that. And I think it's not that likely that the folks who were able to reconnect with friends and family would have done that, at least on that timeline, had they continued to be unsheltered. But I think as people came inside, got some stability, they just had a different opportunity to engage and do and repair some relationships. And so friends and family is an example of a positive exit. There were some folks where we did not have a housing intervention for them in our community, meaning we didn't have the opportunity to refer them to a program. There wasn't inflow opportunities in those programs, or they weren't eligible. For those folks, we tried to, again, be really creative and say, if you can find someone who will rent a room to you or rent a unit to you, if you can find housing on your own, we will figure out how to pay your move-in costs. It needs to be something that you feel like you can sustain, of course. Needs to be a good placement for you, but we will provide that initial move-in support if you can find something that works for you. A number of folks took that kind of pathway. So those are the main things. And then, of course, again, traditional housing programs. Homeward Bound, really tremendous partner in that project. A number of folks moved out of the Ramada into housing programs through Homeward Bound. We also had some folks who exited to programs through Via Help and Helpmate. And then I did include in that positive exit category people who moved into other community programs. So transitional housing at ABCCM, for example, we had one person exit into that. So did include those. So folks who did not return to unsheltered homelessness.
Very good. Thank you. Kimberly, you had something else.
Yeah, very quickly, I just wanted to ask you, Emily, so has your department, in this case just you, because you said you're right now it's just you, or the city in general, ever conducted I don't like surveys very much, but I mean this with simplicity, some kind of outreach survey to all of the citizens to find out if people who have extra rooms, extra space, have ever already in the past supplied housing to anyone, a family member, a neighbor of a neighbor, a friend of a friend, and for how long did they charge them? Because to me, and I really appreciate and value your work so much, but this is really a community responsibility. And yes, there needs to be services at an infrastructure level within municipalities. At the same time, to get to zero, no one person, no one system can do that. So I'm wondering if you've ever done it, if it's ever been done, and if not, and if yes, would it be something to consider? Because we don't know how many people would, if with an incentive, without an incentive, whether it be tax or whatever, to actually become a part of the solution. So I was going to email this to you privately, but I thought, why the heck not? So there we go.
That's great. No, to my knowledge, that survey's not happened from our department here, but I think you're right. That's a great idea. And I think you're exactly right that this has to be a community response. Certainly the city has a role to play in that. And I think this is part of what I was trying to sort of differentiate at the beginning between the city as local government has a responsibility and a response to engage with this issue, and kind of on a separate track as the continuum of care lead, the continuum of care structure is intended to do exactly that, to pull together our whole community to say, like, exactly what you said, it's not possible for a single entity to be the solution. This has to be a community-wide response. And I am such a fan of two things. One, just the very clear acknowledgement that homelessness is terrible and that ending homelessness benefits all of us, right? Every single person in our community benefits from ending homelessness. And so whether you are a person who is just a staunch advocate for homeless people, or whether you're a person who's very frustrated by homelessness in our community, we want the same thing. Like, we have a common goal. And so I think it's really compelling to me to look at how can we all sort of have some skin in that game, and what are actual action steps that all individuals across our community can take to get that community-wide solution.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And I also want to acknowledge with what I'm asking is I recognize that as everyday citizens, we don't all of us have a professional capacity to support the various types of homelessness, right? But maybe we have a capacity to support a person or multiple people over a series of time with a specific need. So the reason why I'm asking this, because I think if we got to a point where we included this as its option, it's no obligation, as just to find out what citizens are already doing. And, we haven't even talked about people living in their cars, which is, I guess, a sheltered version. But then we could take it all to the next step that goes beyond just exhausting muni resources, which can never take care of this alone. So that is my one big contribution. I probably have 80 more, but for today, that's all I'm willing to offer. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you, Sage.
I'll just say quickly, as I am the liaison to this board, I'm also on something called the Home Consortium, which is a 4-county consortium: Henderson, Transylvania, Madison, Buncombe. And as part of the rescue plan federal funding, a program that we administer called Home Funding received an additional $4.7 million specifically to work on homelessness. So that period of application and awarding is coming up. I think the application process, we're trying to get it to be out by May, and then the allocation could be like November and such. But that's money specifically coming into our 4-county region to work on homelessness. So I'm saying that to say, there's an additional one-time resource right now, but as the largest city and the most urban area of all of those 4 counties, this downtown commission could recommend something. I mean, since I work for both, I could take that recommendation to the Home Consortium. So if you all want to, use your voices to recommend something that you think would benefit downtown, please feel like you can, and that I'll advocate for it.
Okay. We probably need to come back with this, and we don't need to keep bothering Emily with all of it. I really appreciate all this thought that you've been putting into it. Let's think about this a little bit more. Any closing comments or thoughts for Emily as we've got her? Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I just want to say that this really highlights the value of the Downtown Commission, and that I know that full city council is relevant to full city council. It's relevant to our entire community, and being able for us to make the time for that right here at the commission level and making that available to the public and everything you presented is absolutely valuable and really helps streamline probably meetings upstream from us at the city council level. So just want to say thank you for being here and for making the time for all of us in the commission and the public.
Go ahead, Dana.
Just want to highlight something Emily had previously said, which is HIAC is going through kind of a bit of a refocus, and that commission meets monthly. That's a great place to continue to stay fully informed on everything going on. And again, thanks to Megan and to Robin for stepping up from the Downtown Commission to make sure they can serve as some form of a liaison to you all. But we do need, as the city, these primary bodies. So I just want to flag that again, and that we should all keep an eye on the work of HIAC. And thank you, Emily.
Very good. Thank you. That was great. Let's move back to Danielle, who's going to give a presentation on migratory birds and lighting. You're muted, Danielle. Danielle, you're muted. Sorry.
There we go. Good morning, everybody. That was very interesting. I was glad to listen into that. I know that is a huge issue, and I'm grateful for everybody doing their work on this. I actually have Dana, who's going to put up a little slideshow. Dana, I'm going to have to ask you to kind of forward the slides as we go, if you wouldn't mind. That would be super.
No problem.
I appreciate that. We'll start with, here we go. You could go to the next slide. So you were going to speak with Paulina today. She's a recent UNCA graduate student, and she's been working full-time. However, the Blue Ridge Audubon Commission and Committee has actually hired her to work full-time on our Lights Out, or part-time on our Lights Out project. So I'm stepping in for her today, just so you all know how this all evolved. So I apologize that I didn't get the links and all that. So we're back on board. Once again, my name is Danielle. I am a board member at large. We formed with Blue Ridge Audubon's Commission, Blue Ridge Audubon Program. And we formed this about 2 years ago, Sarah, Paulina, and I, addressing the need to create a Lights Out program here in Asheville. And as you see, we have several partners aboard, including the Sierra Club, Greenworks, Mountain True, USFW, and Astronomy of Asheville, as well as National and North Carolina Audubon. Next slide. Next slide. During the spring migration, which is occurring actually right now, and over the fall months, over 698 million birds take flight headed south and then eventually head back north. Million pass over the Asheville area, as you can see on the map. We are in what they consider called the flyway zone of these birds between their breeding and wintering grounds. And also, just an FYI, but Buncombe County is in the top county in North Carolina for bird watching and tourism. Next slide. This just gives you little information of how many species and what we have that do come through this area. As you see, Cane Creek, as well as Beaver Lake Bird Sanctuary, especially see a huge variety of species of birds. So we get a lot of national attention here in Asheville just over birding. Next slide. So during migration, intense lights can disorient migratory birds, causing them to collide with windows or walls, which can leave them weak and exhausted, injured, and most likely death. We lose in the US alone over 1 million birds per day just to window collisions, which is very upsetting. It's actually, our numbers are down to a 27% decrease in songbirds nationally. Asheville is listed in the top 125 cities that produce migration disrupting light pollution. Research has shown that eliminating non-essential indoor and exterior lighting at night during migration times can significantly reduce bird mortality. So we got together with the sustainability group and we kind of collaborated, and they helped us get a signed proclamation with the mayor. That is the Coalition for Bird Friendly Asheville, UNC Audubon, Blue Ridge Audubon, with the support of our partners, where the city will turn their lights off on all city buildings during migration periods. So they're also encouraging commercial building owners and operators and tenants to voluntarily switch off unnecessary lights, and by utilizing the city communication channels to raise awareness of our coalition. Next slide. Following slide. Lights, what we have right now. Actually, we did do a walk downtown, and the city has been doing great. We were really quite impressed of them really addressing this issue, and a majority of the city buildings are cooperating with this. But we still have some key pocket areas, but so far so good with the city. Lights, for example, if we use shielding that could be aimed downward, we're asking to use the lowest light level required, as well as timers, motion detectors, to close blinds to ensure that light is available when it's needed, plus limit the amount of shorter wavelength light to the least possible amount, which, as you see here, is below 6,000 K. Next slide. So this is basically a group. This is the International Dark Sky Association. The IDA has been pretty substantial in doing work with this globally, and has addressed lights out here for quite some time. They have a big thing going on, as you see in the slide, what we could do, what's the purpose, how can we address this, what kind of light we could use. This has been studies and studies that have been going on for quite some time. Next slide. So this is basically what we've asked the city, is to turn off lights when not in use, put on timers, kind of advance their motion sensors, change the bulbs, and put out notes to all members in the city buildings to close blinds. Next slide. This slide, I can't do complete justice. I wish Sarah was here to discuss this with you, but she's in the middle of approaching finals. So bear with me on this. She knows more of the science than I do. But really, basically what we're saying here is, by just reducing glare, by simply putting on some shielding, can simply reduce the glare, and that increases nighttime visibility. So by just doing simple installations that are not costly, could change what we're doing here around the city, which will benefit humans and animal health. And it also, in the long run, is going to reduce usage of energy emissions and light pollution as a whole. Next slide. This is what I kind of just discussed. So if you also see here too, we have talked and we're able to get rebates by adding sensors. We have things that have worked. So far, so good. As I said, a lot of buildings have reduced light pollution. We have also brought on a fellowship student with UNCA, and she's going to be doing some statistics for us, and we're pretty excited to have her aboard. Next slide. Yeah, this is a good slide as well. So community outreach and education, that's kind of one of our key things. We are currently working on creating some programs where we could do, if the building owner decides or manager decides to join us, we have them sign a pledge form that they're working together as a city, with the city. And this is kind of now where we're trying to speak with you, because the Asheville Downtown Commission has expressed its commitment to provide recommendations and outline policies that facilitate the sustainable development of the city of Asheville. The Lights Out Asheville is a program that is centered on sustainability, basically. From energy savings to ecological consequences, Lights Out Asheville will enhance the sustainability of all who participate and support the program. With Asheville Downtown Commission has an established extensive network, businesses, building owners, managers, community members, and city staff rely on the commission's expertise and guidance to move in the direction of sustainable development. So the Design Review Committee is instrumental, as we understand, in ensuring that new development aligns with smart growth and development goals. So we would like really to connect with the Design Review Committee and provide insight into ways that they can use their authority to promote bird-safe development. I know there's been some questions about being too dark and crime preventions. There's been massive amount of studies on that, and they really have not proven that that is a fact by turning off the lights that's going to deter crime. So we're not asking for all lights to be extinguished, and that light necessarily for making people safe should be responsibly installed. Final slide, I believe. Yes, that was it. Reduce that. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Kimberly, I think you have a question.
Yeah. Hi, Danielle. Thank you for
Hello.
your presentation. So I am not only on this commission, the Design Review Committee, but I'm also a board member of Mountain True.
Oh, great. Yes.
Big on energy conservation, water conservation, and we are avid bird watchers. However, one thing you don't know about me is I'm also very, very big on the need for lighting, especially within the district, ground level lighting, to be very specific, not just for safety, but because, you know, no offense to your example, but your example showed a white-bodied human in two types of lighting. But that for a dark-bodied person may not be the same. And if you may or may not be aware, but historically we have, you know, decades and decades of issues of people having fear around dark bodies walking out at night because of visibility. Okay. So
Right.
I'm not, dark bodies aren't more inclined to commit crimes, right? So that's not my issue. So my thinking here is there a height level, you know, 20 feet, 15 feet high that you're actually going for, or do you just want all lights to be diminished at some level, which we have to balance human and natural environment? Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Kim. No, that what you're saying is exactly true, and that has been studied. I know what you're talking about. I think the major thing is what we're trying to do, if anything, is getting the light directed down. So if you know, let's get past the glare and those kind of impacts. But there is a lot of things just here in town that shoot brightly up north. And so I think that's half of it, is that if we could just change the direction of the lighting and maybe reduce the color of the lighting and the wavelengths, that would be a huge impact. We're not asking to remove all lighting. It's just the more or less upward lighting, especially in the buildings that have lights on all night that don't necessarily have to be on.
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Well, and the city ordinance dark sky initiative recognizes required bug ratings. A bug rating is the I have to remember now. Uplight, glare. What's the B? A backlight. Yeah. So any light behind the fixture, any light above the fixture, and then the glare, and then we also address some color temperature things. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. This is really interesting. I do a little bit of bird watching every morning over coffee. I've got 8 chickens, and my roommate just got into bird watching, and so
Yes.
I definitely fun and valuable to protect that. And I'm wondering, I know that the city has some opportunities to do well, but I think the city has some opportunities to enforce our existing rules better. Can you comment on like whether you think that we have whether like our the enforcement on private property of the existing rules is lacking, or whether the law of the code governing that is lacking? You know, do you know
Sure.
enough about that to comment?
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. You know, just so you all understand, this proclamation just occurred within the last few weeks. So we are kind of diligently working to, you know, we're learning as we go with a lot of this information, just so you understand. But yes, I think there's 2 things happening here. The city, yes, I believe can do more in the sense of communicating. They did do a press release, some general information. We have done some things with some local magazines and what have you. But as what we really need, and I'm going to be very straight with this, is connecting with groups, with building owners, managers, developers, so we can share this lights out information. And that's kind of where we've stalled a little bit, because unless we cold call to get in to talk to these people, it's going to be difficult to make this move forward. I just want to throw out, there's like over 40 major cities doing this, and it's been a very successful program. So I feel that we can do this, and the potential is there to do this. It's just a matter of how we're going down the line with it. But yes, I think both the city as well as local building owners could be doing more.
Yeah, I can think of some who could be doing more, and I might have the contact for you to reach out to them. So if you'd like to, if you can ask Dana for my email address,
Sure.
And then send me an email, I would be happy to try to connect you with someone that you might be able to work with.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Andrew.
Yo, go ahead.
Just excellent conversation. I just wondered a couple of things. Have you, the people that design lighting for developments,
Yes.
architects, landscape architects, engineers, have you had a chance to speak to maybe the professional organizations in town? I mean, a lot of them already know about these kinds of things. I mean, Brian and I have been talking in a separate working group about bringing lights down, you know, this is for tree canopy, but it also seems the same functions. You light the area that needs to be that's actually used, and if you're getting a lot of spill light and you're actually looking directly at the source of the light, that's a lot of wasted energy.
Correct.
These are sort of, to me, these are kind of common concepts. Also, I did a study back in the early 90s for a bank in New Orleans, and one of the things that we discovered is the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. Even at a lower, and that was to Kim's comment, is the color rendition changes things as well. Yes. People's skin colors change depending on whether it's a warm light,
a cooler
light, you know. So those things actually do have a real impact. I wonder, have you reached out to the professional organizations and I think this is a good example for them to, to start thinking of in terms of lighting design.
Yes, there's actually a program that's been developed just for architects that we're going to be promoting. But to be honest, we really need to create some kind of building ordinances that promote bird-friendly development for new construction and remodels. I know, like just for example, New York City now has laws in place. Anything that's going up has to be bird-friendly glass. Anything that's being remodeled has to be bird-friendly. So there is that power. And I'll tell you, the new materials that they're coming up with are phenomenal. And it's just a matter of getting that word out. But have we talked to them targetedly, specifically? No. But it would be nice to deal with the next step with the city to get some kind of building ordinances passed. I think that would really make this move a lot quicker. But I agree with what you're saying. The International Dark Sky Association recommended responsible or outdoor lighting, bird-safe glass, enhanced urban canopies, things like that. And it's clearly right at our fingertips. All this knowledge is right here. I think if we could count on the design review committee to recommend lights out appropriate lighting fixtures to developers in Asheville, that would be huge.
Kimberly, go ahead.
Yeah, Danielle, two quick questions.
Yes.
What percentage of the other 40 cities have similar terrain to us?
That's a good question. I would have to look that up, Kim.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So if you would, that would be great. I think that's really important, number one. And number two, to kind of piggyback on that question that I just asked, is there any data that shows that biodynamic or any kind of natural landscape to the natural ecosystem of a specific area that's implementing this program has also contributed to the safety of the birds? And what I mean by that is, yes, we're talking specifically at night, but rooftop gardens or certain trees or other things architecturally that aren't just about changing the built materials. I'm not suggesting they shouldn't be changed, but I think what I'm asking is, like, what other layers of development and inspection have been done to say, because, green roofs here are going to continue to flourish. How has that impacted it? If we added other elements on a green roof, would it actually change and support that migratory pattern? So I'm not sure I personally have enough information to know how to advocate for what you're asking for, because I think our topography, our built environment, and also some of our green initiatives that we really advocate for, not just in the CBD, but outside, I need to see that data. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was a good discussion. Any final comments for Danielle? Sasha and then Gia.
Hey, my camera's blocked, so I'm not going to bother with it. But my question, just from a staff perspective, is I'm wondering if the height of the building makes a difference. Like, are taller buildings a bigger priority for you all? And is there, is it over 2 stories, 3 stories, or is it just every single building?
That's a good question. Statistically, believe it or not, 4 stories and down are some of our most massive kills. That's because the birds, that's where they're flying. They nest down there, they're feeding down there, and it's all about reflections. So even, I'm sure you've heard thumps on your window and people like, oh, it flew away. Those usually go into a death spiral within 24 hours from concussions. So it's a sad thing, but it really is the smaller buildings because of the activity. However, what we're finding with skyscrapers and 5 floors plus is the numbers are not as high on daily window strikes as it is during the migration period. I don't know if you've ever seen, and I mean, it's horrible to see, but there are some videos out there where, especially, oh gosh, I'm not gonna tell you the right racetrack that it occurred, but like a couple thousand birds all hit this window, like right at the same time. And it was just horrible. And of course, I think it was in Philadelphia. And so what we have is two things going on here. Yes, there's a lot of community outreach and education that we need to teach just here through our neighbors of like what they could do. They're simple, very inexpensive things they could do with their own windows. But during the migration period, we're finding these exhausted birds are being drawn by the light because they're on a magnetic force, and they're being dropped further south. And that's what's happening is we're losing a massive amount because of light pollution. So it's a twofold issue.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Gio.
Just one added problem that we have with general parking lot lighting and street lighting is it not only affects birds, but it affects the trees that are nearby. It changes their daily rhythms. Trees that are subject to 24-hour lighting, they don't act the same as trees that are in a natural environment. And so this is a complicated issue. But if we would deal with it on a broader perspective, I think we could have a healthier environment, not just for our birds, but also for our living creatures.
Yes, it's very true. And I do hope now that you've all heard about this, that the commission, kind of supports what we're trying to do. And I will get back that information to you, Kim. But, by connecting our group with building owners, managers, and developers, will really kind of launch us to the next level. And I think, it's kind of a win-win for everybody. And I can't press that hard enough. We have a lot of birders that do come through. So it's kind of, in one sense, a business model, it's big. Since COVID occurred, birding has become a huge thing in our world. More and more people have gotten outdoors. Like even Andrew mentioned, there's just more interest. Then you also have not just that, but you are reducing lights significantly. That's why the city was very interested. I mean, we're saving them, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, just turning the lights off in that 5 to 6 month period between 11:30 to 6 in the morning. So that's a big carbon footprint right there. So and then it's just in general, we're saving the birds' lives, and with between climate change and all these other issues, that's kind of that's where we're headed. So whatever we could do to support not just our community with energy, but with the birds would be a huge step for us. And Asheville, I can't imagine of all cities, we would be one of the groups that would be doing this. So I'm very appreciative of what the proclamation that was signed, and I hope we could go to the next level.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Very good. Well, if there are no other questions, we're going to move on. If you folks can stick with us for another 12 or so minutes, I think we can wrap up at 11. Thank you again, Danielle.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's nice talking with you.
All right, we will move into updates and reports. Design Review Committee, Stephen Lee.
Thank you, Brian. Just 2 points that I've got noted here to share. We had 3 new members join that have lots of experience, and I think all of us are really excited about the new members, Kate and Kaya, Christina Boer, and Ricardo Ciejo. There was one project that was going to be reviewed last month. It was pulled, and I think we're going to be reviewing it in April, and that is, again, the 72 Broadway building next to the Masonic Temple. We reviewed several others outside of the downtown area, and that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Megan, a downtown business survey review.
Yeah, I can do that first, or the Downtown Association.
Yeah, whichever one you want to do. You're running it.
I'll just roll into both of those. From a general update, we are kicking off our event season next week. We added a April date to our Downtown After 5 calendar. So we'll have that 6 times a year starting next week, where we've got several local bands on the calendar for the year, as well as some regional touring bands. And as usual, we are limiting our vendor programs to all local food vendors to support those folks. We're also producing a concert with the Steep Canyon Rangers, a free concert in Pack Square Park on May 7th. And we're beginning work on bringing back the full July 4th event with fireworks and the whole shebang downtown. So be looking for that. Of course, always looking for volunteers. If anyone is interested, just let me know. We are hosting a downtown cleanup day on April 19th. I'd love to see some representation from our downtown commission members. It is a Tuesday. I recognize that's a little bit difficult for some folks, but the purpose is really to get businesses involved in the hopes that the property or the business owner will encourage their employees to participate. We do have about 100 volunteers already signed up, so that's awesome. And partnering with Asheville Greenworks, of course, the city of Asheville, and then Beloved as well on that project. So if you'd like more information or the link to sign up, I can send that out later or try to drop it in the chat here when I'm done. And then some of you might have seen that local artist, Ian Wilkinson, updated the Waterfall Mural on the staircase between Battery Park and Wall Street, and it almost was a repaint and a full refresh, and it looks great. We're on our contract with that is through 2024. I hope that we're able to figure out a way to keep it and or to do a new project there. Of course, that will take some funding. And that's mostly what I have for the Downtown Association. So unless there's questions, I'll just roll into the survey review. Okay. So several of you attended our State of Downtown Luncheon last month. So you heard my report on this. I'm just going to touch on a few key takeaways. You have the link that Dana provided. That is just some summary data. I also have another document I can share where we asked a lot of open-ended questions, and those can be tough to put into a final document. So I do have a one that has some word clouds that sort of tries to get to what were the key responses in those open-ended questions. But just quickly, we had 101 businesses that we did focus on businesses for this survey. So 101 businesses filled out the survey. We did encourage business owners to share the survey with their employees. So we do have some businesses that were represented twice. Not very many, but I think that the employee perspective is really important to get as well. We asked, the types of businesses. About 2/3 of respondents were either a retail gallery or a food and beverage type business. So that's who we heard the most from. When we asked them top 3 reasons for being downtown, right, for wanting to be in downtown, we wanted to ask a positive question because the survey does get into a lot of issues. We heard central location, downtown foot traffic, tourism location, business community, those kinds of answers. No surprise there. When we asked the top 3 issues that your businesses faces, here's where we saw homelessness come in. Tal, I think you were mentioning that earlier, as well as safety concerns and cleanliness. Parking came in a very close 4th. It used to be the #1 issue. It has slipped. And when people talk about parking, they're really talking about affordable parking options for their employees. I'll go into those other 3 issues in just a second. We asked people to rank some services, and we saw really these 3 answers kind of almost came in neck and neck. So enhanced safety measures, outreach services, and programs for people experiencing homelessness, and enhanced maintenance really sort of came in those top 3 very close together. So almost, a tie answer there. When we asked about issues as they impact your business, we saw reducing homelessness as the #1 response, and then increasing safety again came in neck and neck with that, and then improving cleanliness and reducing criminal activity. Also, when we asked people how safe they feel in downtown during the day, we saw an answer of roughly 3.5 out of 5. But that number drops to just below 2 when we ask the same question about how safe do you feel at night in downtown. And then the reasons for that, right? Why did you answer that way? People say that, they increasing crime, whether that's a perception or in fact a truth. That is the #1 answer, with decreased police presence. Really, both of those answers are tied for first place. I mean, there's almost no differentiation between the 2. So let's see. We asked a couple questions around homelessness, and I thought there were some interesting answers here, and I hope that I can get back with Emily and talk about how to like move these issues forward. But folks, when we asked if they supported an emergency shelter, so this has lots of names, right? Low barrier, high access, emergency shelter. We did see that about half of the respondents said yes, with about 30 folks saying they're just not sure. And really that, I think they had questions and they needed more education around that issue. So we also asked people about supporting alternative approaches to addressing homelessness, nonviolent issues surrounding homelessness, such as an expansion of Buncombe County's community paramedicine program. This far and away received 77 responses, said yes. So there's obviously a lot of support for that. And then again, there were a few folks that said unsure. And I think with more education on that issue, they probably would get to a yes. And then this was an interesting question, and I need to follow back up on it and figure out the best way to follow up on it. But we asked if people would be willing to hire someone who was either currently or formerly homeless, if there was a program in place that helped ensure the success for both the employee and the employer. We saw about half, again, say yes, and another 40, so almost half, say they were unsure. I think that's really interesting to me, and I'd love to be able to go back to those businesses, and say, here are some options for how you can get involved and how you can sort of start that process and get into a program. So I definitely want to do more on that response. Let's see, cleanliness. We asked people to rank cleanliness in downtown, and this was ranked at basically a 2 out of 5. You guys probably saw there was an extensive presentation last week or the week before by the newer Assistant City Manager, Rachel Wood, on cleanliness in downtown and what the city is doing and some of the things that, the ways they're partnering on that. So I think that's been something the city has really jumped on and it's really trying to make some strides into. And I've noticed in downtown, I think we're already seeing an improved cleanliness. Do you support having public restrooms in downtown for 24/7 access? 74 people said yes, and then a few others said maybe. So, we've already talked about this. This commission, sent we requested that council work on that through the downtown commission. So I appreciate that. That's been something we've really been focused on. And then we asked a couple questions about like development and infrastructure. With development, the need for affordable and workforce housing in adjacent to downtown was the #1 answer, as well as an infrastructure plan that keeps pace with development. And then lastly, infrastructure, we saw improving pedestrian safety and experience come in as the top answer. And then of course, installation of additional public restroom facilities was a close second. So that's the really quick version of that. Again, I'm happy to share another document with the group if you'd like to take a look at that. We do this twice a year in the beginning of the year and put the results out during the State of Downtown Luncheon, and then we do it again about mid-year. These results are almost immediately shared with City Council, appropriate city staff, Buncombe County commissioners, any other groups and organizations that are working on any of these issues. So I've already presented them to the city's internal downtown staff group. And they do take these things seriously and utilize this information to, put together additional programs and initiatives from the city. So, thanks.
Whenever I see data like this, I always want to see like which areas of town some of this data comes from. That means it's really good data, right? If I want more. Any questions for Megan? That was good. Hopefully all of y'all have the actual PDF document. If you've got any questions or comments or think about it a little bit more.
So just quickly, we did record the State of Downtown Luncheon. And so if you guys, for those of you who weren't able to be there, if you'd like to take a look at that, we tried really hard we actually usually just sort of have 3 presentations about what we're doing, right? The city, the county, and the Downtown Association. This time we worked together to make sure we were addressing the issues that were brought forth. And I'll say that people came to the meeting and said, I've had some concerns about downtown coming into this meeting. While I still have some of those concerns, I feel better knowing what's going on and what initiatives and things are being worked on by these various organizations. So I do think it was helpful. So I can also share the link to the video
great.
as well.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't know that you need to give a report on homeless initiatives. That has been exhaustively covered.
Yeah,
by,
the only
Emily.
I forgot about that. So I did two quick things on that. Emily covered most of it, right? I mean, she's the expert here. So Code Purple is in effect for tonight and tomorrow night as we're seeing temperatures drop below freezing. So just a note there. And as far as the Affordable Housing Committee, that's another one we've been sitting in on. There was a bond update. That was like my key takeaway from that meeting. It just quickly, of the, I think it's $25 million in bonds that were approved back in 2016, 17.6 million has been spent with 7.4 million remaining. There's been 32 acres of land, 403 affordable units, and 92 plus that are in the pipeline. So that was my takeaway from that.
Perfect. Kimberly, go ahead.
Hey, and thanks for your report. I wanted to ask specifically, because we're kind of at the tail end of the pandemic and things will kind of shift, the survey, how much of that was guided by like just loss of services or, you know, that routine with cities, public maintenance and things like that? Was that one of the questions that was asked? And was it like compared to pre versus during versus tail end of pandemic? I know that this is their sentiment now, but the framework or context is always important to me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We didn't ask that question specifically, like have you seen these issues increase, you know, throughout the pandemic? I think one way to maybe try to get at that data is to look at previous surveys and see where things like a 2019 survey maybe, and see sort of where things stacked up. Then we did ask some COVID related questions but they were really more business focused, like are you back to revenue levels or staffing, but not in that in the frame that you're asking.
And then also like and the other question I want to know is like, you know, if you're looking at 2019, was it owner managed and is it mostly staff? Like what staff changes have happened? Because I think that data shifts based on not only what the public services are available during the pandemic, but also what their business model might be in terms of if it was owner operated or now it's a different group of people. So I don't know. I just thought I would throw that in there just because it's hard to know when so many regular services have been shifted as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting point. Maybe we can figure out a way to get to that in the mid-year survey.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Public Space Management Task Force.
So the task force we've had a full meeting, and then we've also had one site visit since the full Downtown Commission last met. We have a pretty big group, so we have this site visit. One took place earlier this week, and we have another one next week, trying to also offer opportunities for those task force members to participate on their own time if they need to. So the first meeting that we had was really kind of getting everyone, providing background on the work that the committee had previously done, talking about the public space management framework, providing some updates on that meeting you all had with the multimodal commission and some of the discussion there. But then, so yeah, folks who have missed that are welcome to go take a look at the recording. It was live streamed. And then these walkthroughs, the first one was great. We had a good mix. We had a couple of busking representatives. We also had several restaurant owners. We had Mike DeSario from Homeward Bound, who manages the street outreach program. And we have some worksheets, so we're asking some different questions at different locations downtown. And I think, part of what this is doing is just getting everyone in the headspace of thinking about the public realm a little bit differently and how it's used and managed. But also in the months ahead, we're going to be asking the task force to help narrow down some priorities from the initial list of 15 priorities that we have in our public space management framework. We're going to be asking for likely a top 3 that we could get focused on in the year ahead. So yeah, it's been fun to get going. Good couple meetings. And Andrew, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. That's a great overview. And so I just want to characterize our work rather than get into the details exactly like Dana did. You know, I'd say the first meeting was, you know, pretty typical first meeting. Everybody's cautious and, you know, just sort of feeling the waters out. And our site visit was really great. There was a tremendous amount of shared recognition of the problems and solutions and what things are working. I did sort of direct us. Dana had done a really great job of showing some problem areas that we want to look at and make sure that whatever recommendations we make are effective in those locations. And I pulled this aside a couple times and said, hey, let's look at some stuff that's working really well, so we can kind of learn from each set of things. And the newer stuff on Haywood Street is really, you can just obviously tell it's working so much better than the older, the parts of the city who haven't seen a lot of attention or have seen some new uses since they were really put together. So I'm really confident that we're going to be able to get a very useful document for the city and for city staff and for users of public space downtown. So thanks to Dana and everybody else on that commission for really putting good work forward.
Very good. Dana, you want to jump into the downtown update?
Your mic's off.
Thank you. Pack Square Plaza improvements. So we had talked previously, we'd shared that the city will be hiring this project management team to work on a plan and vision for the future of Pack Square Plaza. We're conducting interviews with the top firms next week, a team of city and county staff. And so once we get the project manager on board, we're going to get started with the 6 to 9 month community engagement process. So I anticipate that really getting going probably in May. Related, just a note that we were waiting on a court decision about the removal of the remaining portion of the Vance Monument. And the court did make a decision last week and has determined we can proceed with that removal. So I don't have a specific update on the date that we'll be getting back to work on that, but I would anticipate that soon. South Slope, South Side Vision Plan. So you all heard about this plan last month. The survey is open through today. So we did extend the survey deadline. We have gotten a lot of responses so far, which is great. But final opportunity to take the survey today if you have not already. And then Sasha plans to return to the Downtown Commission next month to ask you all for a recommendation to take a vote on moving that plan forward to council. Proposed bike lanes on College and Pattons. We were going to have staff return today, but we had some good input sessions. We had a couple walkthroughs, and transportation staff is currently taking all of that input and making some adjustments to that proposal. So staff plans to return next month, and we'll also ask you all for a formal recommendation on that. Carter and Patton Stormwater Project. I don't have new updates, just want to continue to keep this on your radar. We're finalizing details of a contract, and construction is anticipated to begin probably in June and continue for quite a while, 16 months. It's a great project. It's going to improve accessibility. It's going to improve stormwater and that whole area of town. There are going to be some impacts to the roadway and to the sidewalks during that project. So we'll keep you guys posted on all of those. Proposed advisory board restructure. Staff hosted 4 different workshops and got some input on the initial proposal that had been presented. All of the information, everything we heard, is available on a project page. I've provided a link to that. The next step is that an update is actually going to be provided at the next city council meeting on Tuesday, April 12th. And there's a work session that will be scheduled with city council for May. Staff anticipate asking for approval from council at that time to move forward with a pilot program. So a couple key dates there. And development projects. So we heard from Stephen Lee. The next design review committee meeting is next Thursday, and they'll be reviewing a couple downtown projects informally. 72 Broadway is returning for informal review. 226 Hilliard is a new project. I think it's primarily residential, going for informal review. And no updates on the Eris Pergola. They're going to be proceeding through a conditional zoning process. So we do anticipate that coming back to us. We thought we may be reviewing a demolition at 100 South Lexington, but they've pulled that. So I think they're going to work on the demolition and building proposal at the same time. So we'll see that at some point in the future. And just some other notes on City Council. They held their annual retreat March 17th and 18th. They established 6 strategic priorities for the year ahead: improving and expanding core services, houselessness strategies, equitable and affordable housing and stability, neighborhood resilience, reimagining public safety, and reparations. Of course, that meeting was recorded. Both of those meetings were recorded, and you're welcome to check that out. And our budget process is moving along. The next budget work session is coming up on April 12th on Tuesday. The session following is scheduled for April 26th. And the city manager is scheduled to present a proposed budget on May 24th. And just wanted to highlight, Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood provided a presentation at the March 22nd council meeting on cleanliness strategies, both within downtown and citywide. And I think a lot of that, there was definitely good discussion after the Downtown Association survey about cleanliness concerns. So Rachel laid out both some short and long-term strategies to address some of those concerns. So I would encourage you to take a look at that if you can. We'll obviously keep you posted on initiatives that we're working on. And what else? So Todd was going to be presenting a 1-year update on the hotel development process at next week's council meeting. I think that may just be in a memo format. Of course, I'll share that with you. And updates are going to be provided on the board and commission restructure as part of the manager's report on Tuesday. There's also going to be an update on reparations. And the ARPA funds, so that was also going to be on Tuesday's agenda. That's gotten moved. That's gotten moved to April 26th. So we expect to know how that funding is getting allocated at the end of this month. And meeting format. So some of our quasi-judicial boards have started to go back in person this month, and others of those will go back in person next month. We don't have a date where all the boards and commissions will be going back, but we are heading in that direction. Our tech capabilities are going to be a bit limited. So we're basically planning to go back to our pre-COVID format. We may have the ability to record meetings, but it's not looking like we'll have the ability to live stream meetings. So next month, maybe we can have a little bit more of a discussion about that transition. And I'm curious to hear if you all have any thoughts and preferences on that. Actually, specifically, so before COVID, we were meeting at 8:30 a.m. We've shifted to 9:30 in order to have tech support. I'll definitely have some questions. Maybe I can do a survey of some form to find out what your preferences are with the new meeting time, and also any concerns you might have about returning back to in-person. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Are we ready? Awesome. Is there a motion
Move to adjourn?
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Very good. All in favor, log off. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Have a good one, y'all.